most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We exist on a placid island of ignorance, surrounded by the black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far.
Color Out of Space is one of the most visually stunning, well-acted, and nearly perfect...
It lives in the world. It grew down there, poisoning everything, changing everything into something like the world it came from, into what it knows.
Color Out of Space is one of the most visually stunning, well-acted, and nearly perfectly executed films made in the last decade. From its enchanting score by Colin Stetson of Hereditary fame, that stands entirely on its own, as well as working perfectly in sync with this film, to one of Nick Cage's best performances and a return to form for ostracized director Richard Stanley. But more on that in a few. Color Out of Space tells the story of the Gardner family, having finally escaped the city to live a quiet farm life out in the gorgeous countryside of Arkham, Massachusetts, when one night, after a ritual performed by Lavinia Gardner in the morning may or may not have caused a meteorite to crash land on their farmland in the middle of nowhere. Creepy stuff happens in Nowhere shortly after, as a strange color is seen and then vanishes. And now it's up to Lavinia and the local hydrologist Ward Phillips to save her home. Based on the H.P. Lovecraft story of the same name, it's a relatively faithful adaptation, or at least as faithful as you can be to a Lovecraft story, while bringing it into the 2020s instead of the 1920s. There's a lot of insinuation in the story, and those insinuations get literally fleshed out and expanded upon with some amazing visual effects. It's a mix of practical effects coupled with really smart CGI work and good old-fashioned movie magic, and with all of that, you have yourself a film that is as close to traditional as it gets, and you have Nick Cage on and off here carrying it when he can. He's surprisingly reserved for most of this film until the color's influence on the farm and on the family takes hold. Cage gets his moment to do one of his trademark freakouts, and if you are a fan of Cage, then you'll enjoy this. If you aren't a fan of Cage, then you are in luck, as he's not in as much of this movie as you'd think, despite getting top billing. The real focus almost is on Ward Phillips and Lavinia, played by Elliot Knight and Madeline Arthur. Ward trying to save Lavinia, and Lavinia trying to save her family. It's pretty compelling stuff in my opinion, and seeing the slow decline of the farm as it becomes more alien due to the color is a sight to behold. In Color Out of Space, the titular color is shown as magenta. This is because magenta is not a real color, but is how our minds interpret color our eyes can't see. That sounds like total bullshit, right? But apparently it's true, and it's what Stanley explained on his use of the color choice. However, I'm also inclined to think here that Stanley, naturally being a Lovecraft nerd like myself and many others, saw the incredibly cheap but still excellent black and white version that uses the same color choice. He even does a homage to it at the very end of the film.
A lot of people said to me, "You're thinking of working with Richard Stanley."
Richard Stanley?
Richard Stanley?
Richard Stanley.
He's crazy, right?
I did do the research. I looked at everything to do with Richard and I thought, this guy is interesting.
I remember the documentary and the making of Island of Dr. Moreau.
Lost Soul, which is about Richard directing a little bit of Island of Dr. Moreau and then his career imploding basically.
I haven't directed a theatrical feature film in more than 2 decades, which has been a real long time. And there was a period of time when I never thought I would direct a theatrical film again. Josh had to literally drive to the south of France and abduct me in order for this to happen.
What's the worst that could happen?
Speaking of Stanley, if you don't know who he is, he's the notorious director who, due to Hollywood ridiculous bullshit, got fired from making The Island of Dr. Moreau in the 90s, with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando. There's a documentary on it. It's a crazy story. I highly recommend it. So 2 decades later, pretty much, when not making indie foreign films to get by, he gets Color Out of Space. With plans to do a trilogy, and according to his Facebook page as of 7 months ago, the next film seems to be slowly trekking along with the Dunwich Horror. Color Out of Space was released in 2019, right before the pandemic kicked off, basically killing any momentum this movie had within theaters. But this guy, Stanley, is nothing if not perseverant. After a few years of legal battles with his ex-wife, that he won by the way, Dunwich is on track to supposedly start filming on June 2nd of this year, 2025. So we shall see how that all turns out from this. Should you watch Color Out of Space? Yes, obviously. I suggest buying it, in my personal opinion, so we can get more H.P. Lovecraft movies from Stanley in the future, but you are all welcome to do as you wish.
In the words of our lead character, a dream you dream alone is just a dream. A dream you dream together is reality.
If you like this video, like this video. If you dislike this video, dislike this video. I've been Calypso, and I will see you in the next one.